Before we start the video, a large thank you to two of these lovely people whose name I definitely cannot pronounce. Thank you for the support, guys. It is greatly appreciated. Sarthak, Jules, Borname, Jonathan, Edible, Peter, and Leon for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And an absolutely immense thank you to Halo Burner for their continued support to the channel this month on Patreon. It is greatly appreciated, my friend, and I hope you enjoy the video. Hello everybody, here is my Project Nephilim, and we're going to start equipment today, specifically armor. So if I go here, you can see that all these armor pieces have a value for their absorption and resistance. Ignore the effects, and we can take them off, and we can change them. And this is going to be basically the end goal for our equipment system. So they're going to modify our absorptions, and we can change it, which will change the look of the character like so. And we'll get into doing the UI much later after we get all of the code in place to actually swap out the armor pieces. Alright, so over to our project. Let's go into our scripts folder, and then we're going to go into our items folder, and then we're going to create a new C# script, and we're going to call this equipment item. So equipment item is going to be the base class for everything we can equip, including our already made weapon item. And we're just going to delete our namespace and update function and add in, or sorry, delete our start and update function, add in our namespace as is per tradition. And what does this have that every item is going to have in our game that is an equipment item? Yeah, well, it's going to have an item weight. This is going to come into play in the future when we do equipment loads, which will affect how far or fast you can roll. And in extreme cases, it's going to affect your movement speed. So this is still going to derive from items. This changes nothing. It's not going to break any of your weapons. We're going to go to our weapon item here now, and we're going to make this derive from our equipment item instead of item, which still derives from item, just so we get the item weight on all of our weapons as well. Alright, cool. So let's save that, and now let's jump back into the project. But before I actually do that, you can make a bonus here. If you want to add a list of effects that each item can have, like a list of special effects, you can make an on-item equipped and on-item unequipped call here, and just call these when you equip an item and when you unequip an item, and then you can add the effects to the character. That's how I do my special effects on my unique items inside of my solo project. Someone asked, so I thought I would include it there. There it is. Now, let's make the armor item class, and let's delete the start and update functionality, drop in our namespace. And now, armor item classes are going to be the base class for head equipment, body equipment, leg equipment, and hand equipment. They're all going to share the same values, basically. We want to separate them so we can't put a leg equipment item in the head slot. It's just nicer to do it by class. At least that's how I like to do it. You can do it however you want. You can use an enum if you'd like. But also because the head equipment item specifically needs some special logic, depending on how you set up your character. So what is this going to have on it? It's going to have the physical damage absorption. It's going to have the magic damage absorption, basically all your damage absorption stats that you'd find in the game. So for us, that's, if you're using Elden Ring stats, it's physical, magic, fire, lightning, and holy. So this will be how much of the damage that you just completely mitigate when it hits you and you don't take it forward. It'll be a combination of all your armor pieces together. We'll make each percentage. And then we have our equipment resistance bonuses. So these are things like, you could do them individually if you want, but Elden Ring doesn't do that. So you can do frost resistance. This is how I do it in my game. And then you could do, Elden Ring also has, it's got frost and bleed. They have sleep, but we're going to do it the Elden Ring way. So we're not going to use individual resistances. We're going to use modifiers that affect multiple per. So I believe it's called immunity is the first one. And immunity affects rot and poison resistance. And then we have robustness, which I believe is frostbite and bleed. I'm going to check that though before I make the comment here. Then we have focus, which is sleep and madness. And I think there is finally vitality, which is just the death curse, or it just could be called death buildup. So these are your resistances, and they affect those. So I'm going to make comments here now. Yeah, I'm checking it here now. It is immunity is resistance to rot and poison. And then robustness, I'm just going to say, is your resistance to bleed and frost. And then your focus is your resistance to sleep and madness. And vitality is the resistance to the death buildup or death curse. Okay, there we go. Also, apologies if I sound a little bit different. I'm a bit stuffed up right now. Kind of feel like I'm sounding a little bit nasally. All right, going to save that now. That's good. Now let's go right below that. I almost forgot. We need to include poise as well. So I'm just going to make a header for that. I like keeping poise separate. Wouldn't really call it a resistance. I guess you could call it a resistance. It's your resistance to staggering. But I'm going to keep it in its own separate little category. All right, so now in the future, we're going to have the armor model section here as well. But don't worry about that right now. I'm just going to make that as a comment. That's the armor pieces you're going to equip when you actually equip the item. Let's create a new C# script. I'm going to call this head equipment item. And this is going to derive from our armor equipment item. Let's also do, before we jump into that, we'll just do them all in one shot. So we'll do head equipment item, body equipment item. And then we'll come back in again and we'll do the leg equipment item. And then we'll do the hand equipment item just after that. So leg equipment. So again, they are all going to share the same base class. And the only thing that is likely going to have different logic, unless you want to add your own, which is great because they're all in their separate classes, is the head equipment, because it's going to change some stuff in your character's body depending on what's up when you equip it. So for example, if you have a hood, it's going to probably hide your character's hair. If you have a full helmet, it's going to hide your character's head, etc., etc. So let's just make all of these, the head, the body, and the leg and the hand, derive from the armor equipment. And I did the namespace off video just so I'm saving a little bit of time here. I want to do the repetitive actions there, just cut the videos a little bit shorter, so I'm saving you guys some time. Let's drop in our create asset menu. Let's make these derive from items, armor, head equipment for head equipment, obviously. And then we'll do the same thing, copy and paste that. It will be body equipment for body equipment, and leg equipment for leg equipment, and hand equipment for hand equipment. So we're going to be using these scriptable objects for all of our armor. That's just how I like to do it. I find they're very, very useful for something like this. And we're going to add these two as well to our item database. And I'm going to get into possibly giving them their own item IDs for each individual type, for one for weapons, helmets, legs. That's what I do in Nephilim. I find it's a bit easier and a bit nicer, and I'll get into why in a minute, but we'll get to that. So let's create a new folder in our data items called armor. I'm going to make a new folder inside armor called night set, because the first armor set I make, I'm going to create items. I don't see armor here. What's happening? So right here, we did not make a create asset menu. It will be ignored because it doesn't derive from a scriptable object. So this is what happens if you try to use create asset menu and it's not a scriptable. If I go here, you can see it's deriving from armor item, but we forgot to make armor item derive from the item base class, or I forgot. You probably didn't forget. And, or equipment item, sorry, it should be. And I'm going to save that there now. Go back in and it should be good to go. Yes, it is. Excellent. So I'll make a head equipment piece. And make a body equipment piece, and legs and hands. And then I'm just gonna jump to the Elden Ring wiki and just actually use the base values from the night set there. Pro tip, doesn't matter right now for most of you, I'm sure, but in the future, it's always good to make one armor set and one weapon to act as your medium, like your key balance, and to make all other armor sets around it. So, the balance in my game is my knight set and my straight sword. So heavier weapons are always slightly more damaging, slightly slower than the straight sword. Lighter weapons are always slightly faster, slightly less damaging than the straight sword. It's always nice to have that middle point to refer back to balance around. Makes it a lot easier. So here is the Elden Ring values for the Knight's Helm. I'm just using the wiki here, and I'm just going to basically punch those in, maybe change them a little bit, maybe not. So we just have that nice set to come back to when making other armors. And here you go. It's all done. You can see all the values are punched in. Now let's go to our world item database, and let's make some new lists. So we have the weapon item list. Let's make one for the head equipment, so we'll just change this to head equipment, and then the list will become a list of head equipment items, which we can call head equipment, and we can still make that list a new list here, just declare it right away. So instead of weapons, it will become head equipment, and obviously you just want to do the same now with all of your new equipment types. So I won't do all of these on video, I'll just do one more, and then I'll snap back to when it's done. So while I'm doing this slide, we'll talk about why we should probably give them their own identifications that aren't just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So maybe you want to start all head equipment with 1070, maybe all body equipment with 2070. This is a lot better, and I'll get into why. So down here you can see we're just adding 1 every single time. Well, if you add new equipment pieces in these lists, you're going to change old save files, because what might have been 17 before could now be 16 or 19, because we're basically adding them all to the items list, then assigning their number. So what I do in Nephilim, and you don't have to do it, and I'm not going to do it here because it's not necessary, but it's nice, if you have a final build of the game, it's not going to affect anything. But while you're doing builds and stuff, I make every item assign its ID from its own list, and I give every item an ID key. So I'll show you what that looks like. Basically, let's say you have hand equipment. It might start with 2000. I'm going to make a comment here again, because this is the add new items, the IDs will change, just so it's very clear what's happening. So if you have, say, your gem equipment here, you see I have 140,000, 130,000, 110,000, 100,000, 90,000. And if I find the references here, if I go down, I'm just using the key plus the I, and I'm searching the list that we have and adding it that way. That way, if I add new weapons or new armor or new anything, it doesn't affect the old values, and they're still going to be the same because they still add in the same order of the list. The only way it would be affected is if I change the order that they were added in on the list, which I never do. So I encourage you to do it that way if you'd like. Again, it's not a mandatory thing. It just makes it easier for adding and removing items. It's, well, adding items specifically. So I'm going to go ahead now and continue on the video. And if you want me to do that in the video manually so you can see how to do it exactly, let me know and I totally will. But it's a pretty simple process that I'm sure you can figure out. So let's make a public head equipment item, get head equipment item. And we're going to do the exact same thing we did from our weapon item. We're just getting a head equipment piece from our list of head equipment items. This is going to come in handy in the future. Right now, not too important. And we're going to do the same thing for our body equipment, our leg, and our hand equipment. Again, I just did that one off video just to save you some time. If you want to pause it, that's cool. Try to condense these down to as short of time as possible because it's already going to be quite long. So after we have all that, let's go ahead and go to our prefab world item database. Don't go to the one in the scene. Always edit the prefab, and the one in the scene will edit automatically. Because if you edit the one in the scene and forget to do the prefab, and then edit the prefab one day, they're not going to be the same. So after that's done, you can see here in the scene, yes, that has been added. Cool. Now we got some items, but we have no way to really equip them right now. So let's go over to our player equipment manager. And what we want to do, this is going to be a header debug delete later because this is not permanent. This is just how I'm going to show you that this works in this video. We're going to actually make equipment change from a UI later on. But for now, until we have that done, we can just keep this here. So let's make a serializable field bool, equip new items, initialize that at false. And then we're going to add our update function in here. And we're going to say if equip new items, we're going to immediately change that to false so it doesn't run more than one time. And then we're going to call upon a function which doesn't exist yet. So let's make that first actually. Let's make it a private void. And we can say debug equip new items. I like putting debug in front of these functions because it's very clear to me that this is not permanent. I'm going to delete it later. It's just something I do. Just don't want to end up leaving these here in accident. Not that it would matter too much, honestly, but just preference. So let's add a debug.log. We have equipped, or we are equipping new items, so we know it's going to run. When it runs, we can save that, and we call that function in that update. So next, let's go to the player inventory manager now, and let's add a head equipment item, a body equipment item, a hand equipment item, and a leg equipment item. I'm going to make a header here for the weapons, and I'm going to make a header for the armor. Alright, so you could also put this on your player equipment manager if you want to, but I like keeping all the currently equipped things in the player inventory manager. It just makes the most sense to me, but again, it is just preference. Put it wherever it makes the most sense to you. So I'm just going to quickly just hammer these out. Head equipment, body equipment, and then the hand equipment. So obviously we have no way to manually equip these things right now via UI, so we're just going to kind of drag them in the inspector. But we're also going to go back to the player equipment manager scripts, and we're going to make some functions here. So I'm just going to make a comment here for equipment just to separate it. So if you're, coming by here a long time in the future and you see these bright green comments, it kind of makes it very distinguished from the weapons right below. You can easily find what you're looking for. I find the text all kind of blends together without these comments sometimes. So public void load head equipment. Let's just do some pseudocode first. Let's kind of talk about what we're going to do. And I'll actually type these out and then talk about them after, so it's a bit quicker after I get this one done. So first, unload the old equipment models, if any. 2, if you have on an item equipped, call it on your equipment. Remember, I was just talking about if you want to add effects to your character when you equip and unequip a weapon, this is where you do it. You call the on item equipped right here. If the equipment is null, you want to simply set the equipment to null, wherever it is in the slot, and then return. And to be honest, actually, this should go before number 2, so I need to swap these around. It's my bad. So I'm just going to quickly do that real fast. There we go, paste this here, and then snap that. So number 4, set the current head equipment in the player inventory to whatever equipment piece has been passed to this function. So that becomes the new one. And then number 5, if you need to check for head equipment type to disable certain body features, for example, hoods will disable your hair, this is the place you want to do it. You want to disable those body parts right now. Number 6, you want to load the new head equipment models. We're not going to do that though right now, that won't be in this video. We're going to calculate the total equipment load of all your weight and worn equipment. That's when we're going to do the weight distributions and the fat rolling and stuff. Won't do that for a little bit though, probably after armor. And then we're going to calculate the total armor absorption. We're going to handle this one right now. So that's going to be basically all your defensive stats combined with all your total armors. Now, I've made load body, load leg, and load hand. It's all the same thing. I've changed the comments just a little bit, but All three of these are identical. We're not checking for a specific head equipment type, so I removed that piece. Whoops, I forgot to change the variable types though. So this requires a body equipment variable, this requires a leg equipment variable, and this one requires you pass a hand equipment variable. Now let's go ahead and call all of these on our debug equip new items function. First, let's check though if they're not null in the player inventory manager. Otherwise, we are going to get an error because although we say we were going to check for null in our pseudocode, we're not actually doing anything right now. So if it is null, you will get an error. So I'm just going to say if the player inventory manager head equipment does not equal null, load head equipment, and we pass the player inventory manager head equipment. I'm also going to do the same thing with the body equipment, and then off video I'll just snap back. I'm going to do the same thing to the leg and the hand equipment. By the way, if you guys don't like me snapping back like this all the time, just let me know. I can stop doing it. I'm just trying to conserve some of your time while watching this video. If you'd rather me do everything as slowly as possible on video, just comment below. I think the speed right now feels pretty great, but it's up to you guys. So back over to the player stats manager, I'm going to make a public void for calculate our total armor absorption. Honestly, probably not a good word to say absorption because it should be calculate total armor values because it's much more than absorption. So let's go to the character stats manager and let's actually add in all of these variables now for everything we've added to our armor. So you can see we have blocking here. We have our total poise down here. It's starting to fill out a lot. It's really good. So let's add another header, 2 headers. One for the armor absorptions, similar to the blocking absorptions, but this is for the armor only. And then one for the armor resistances. I say armor resistances because you can get resistances other ways, like naturally through your stats. Those are your flat resistances when you raise vitality and stuff, but we'll get into that in the future. Also maybe from an effect of an item, so it'll be a modifier. So I'm going to copy all these variables over here on the armor item class, and I'm going to paste these right here under our new little headers. Whoops, didn't mean to delete the header, under the new header. And I'm going to change their names a little bit because again, on the armor item, it doesn't matter. There's only one immunity variable. But here, there's going to be your flat immunity in the future and your armor immunity. So we're just going to put the keyword armor in front of all of these. So physical damage absorption becomes armor physical damage absorption. Magic damage absorption becomes armor magic damage absorption, etc., etc. So that's all done. Again, I just did a hard cut, so you don't have to watch me rename all those variables. And then I'm going to go back over here now to our calculate total armor absorption function under the player stats manager. So what's the first thing we do? Well, the first thing we always want to do is reset all values to 0 because we're recalculating them. We don't want to add on to them. We just want to completely knock them back to base, which is 0. And this is why you have modifiers for separate values because those are independent of your armor and those should not be knocked back to 0. But all of your armor values should be knocked back to 0. So first we do all of our damage absorptions. So it's the physical, the magic, the fire, the lightning, and then the holy. Those should all be knocked back to 0. And after that, we want to do our resistances. The autocomplete here does not want to help me. There we go. Armor holy damage absorption is equal to 0. So after that, we do our resistances. So it will be our immunity, our focus, our robustness, and our vitality. We're just going to knock all those back to 0. So armor robustness is equal to 0. Armor vitality is equal to 0. Then I'm going to say armor immunity is equal to 0. And then armor focus is equal to 0. And then, oh, I almost forgot poise as well. I believe we called that base poise defense. Let me check. Yeah, so base poise defense, we have a comment here. This is the poise bonus gain from armor and talismans, etc. So we knock that back to 0 too because that's being recalculated. So we're going to say base poise defense is equal to 0. Now that we have that done, what we want to do is one by one, check each armor slot for its respective piece and see if it's not null. So if the player inventory manager .head equipment does not equal null, then we're going to run some logic. Likewise, if the player inventory body equipment is not null, so if we have a head equipment piece or a body equipment piece equipped, if there's something there, then we're going to check for this logic. Likewise, here we're going to do the same thing for our leg and our hand, and now we can start filling in some values. So what do we do? Well, it's really simple, super simple actually. I'm just going to make some comments here again to separate these just so it's very, very clear. And I won't make you watch me do all that. There we go. So we're just going to add onto our values here every piece from our separate armor pieces of equipment. So armor physical damage absorption plus equals, which means we take what it already is, which currently is 0, and we add the head equipment's physical damage absorption. Then we do the same thing with the magic damage absorption. We take what it already is. That's what plus equals is. It's the same as saying magic damage absorption is equal to magic damage absorption plus. But plus equals is just shorthand, in case you didn't know. I'm sure all of you knew that, but I thought I'd explain it anyway. So we're going to do the same thing with fire and all the other areas. We're basically just taking every single value we have and we're adding on the values of that respective type from the current armor piece. So the fire damage from the helmet is added on to our fire damage regularly. The lightning damage from our helmet is added on, and then we do our resistances, and then we do our poise. And then we're doing the same thing here with every armor piece. I've added some comments here, just didn't want to make you watch me type all that out again, but you see I have all the resistances, all the damage types, and my poise. We do the same thing with every different armor piece, and since our variables are all the same, we just copy all of this and paste it, and then we can change the head equipment variable name, just change head to body, and you're good to go, and then body to legs, and then legs to hand, and that's it. So this is how it looks when you're all done. I'm going to scroll past this. The comments make it really easy to read for me. If you don't like them, then definitely don't add them in, but I'm a fan. So once that's all good to go, we can save that. Let's actually call this function now. If we go back to our player equipment manager, you can see here down on comment pseudocode number 8, calculate the total armor absorption. Well, I'm just going to place that right under there, and we can do that for all of these. So we can say player.player stats manager calculate total armor absorption, and that's it. So let's go ahead now and put that also on the load body, load leg, and load hand equipments. Now in the future, we're going to handle armor just like we handle our weapons. They're going to be changed with a network variable on an ID, and that is going to trigger a non-value change, which is going to trigger these functions. But for now, if we go into the scene here, and if I drop down to my player inventory manager, let's put on a helmet first. Let's just do that. Click on the knight's helm here. Then I go down to my player equipment manager and tick our little debug box that says equip item. You can see here, before I do that, all my values are 0. None of my resistances or absorptions have changed. If I tick that, the armor or equipping new items, then our armor physical goes to 4.4, then our 3.8 for the magic. It's just all the values in the helmet, basically. Now, let's go ahead and try equipping the rest of the items. So I'm just going to throw on the knight's armor, the knight's leg equipment, and then the hand equipment. And now we should get a combination of all 4 pieces added together. So equip new items, and bam, yes, we do. So there you go, guys. That's the first part of our armor system. We got the number stuff out of the way this time as opposed to the model stuff. But we're going to get to that too. In the next couple of episodes, we're going to get some armor models up. So for that, I am going to supply a very simple helmet model or some kind of head equipment for the dummy we have. But I'm also going to suggest several assets, or at least a couple on the asset store that I found and used. And keep in mind, you're going to have to probably tweak some things if you have your own kind of character models, because when it comes to changing out armor, the system we're going to use is just enabling and disabling objects. So it might change a little bit depending on how you have your character set up, but all the principles should be exactly the same regardless. So thank you once again for joining me this weekend, guys. I hope you all have a very lovely weekend. A special and immense thank you to all of my patrons. It is because of each and every one of you I got to keep doing this. So genuinely from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much, guys. I do love doing this. Once again, I do hope you have a lovely weekend, and I will see you guys next week for the next part of our armor system.